Hello, everybody. It's Merlin here, and we're going to talk about Avatar: The Way of Water. This was requested by Ula, actually, a fairly recent addition to the channel. We recorded a podcast review of the James Franco Planet of the Apes movie. If you want to check that out, kind of hear some of her opinions on that. And yeah, so she wanted me to talk about it because I was sort of discussing with her and then ranting. So she's like, "You should just make a video about this," which I was planning on, but I know it's been a couple days since I've been able to actually find the time to record. So the struggle will be to remember and see if I can get back some of that passion I had about the movie one way or the other. So anyway, the Avatar: Way of Water is a sequel, obviously, to the 2009 film. A lot of you probably already know that. So 13 years in the making. Here it is. Let's see. I have a lot of thoughts about it, but I'm going to basically try to narrow it down to get some of the basics out of the way. All right. So as far as the plot goes, I mean, at first glance, when I looked at the trailers, I was like, okay, this is basically just the same movie again. Okay, we've got the Earthlings coming back to Pandora to destroy everything, take the resources. Imperialism, colonialism, allegories. Man versus nature, and the technology versus nature. A lot of the stuff we saw in the first movie, which wasn't very subtle, obviously borrowed from a lot of things, but things that worked. So, I mean, a little bit of backstory. As far as I feel like Avatar is kind of a really divisive movie. I know that among people in my circle, I know people that really dislike it. Dan over at Dan Reviews It, plug to check out his channel. I do reviews with him all the time. He, I mean, he respects the visuals of the first movie, but like a lot of people, doesn't really like the story because it's not very original and it's not particularly deep. And with all the hype surrounding it, there might have been some antagonism towards the film because of that, I think. But he notoriously doesn't really like the movie that much. My friend Justin, I believe, actually likes it more. And I know some people just around who honestly don't like it. I think people in my family, when it came out, we loved it. I remember seeing the first movie in the theaters and being blown away by it. And I do think it is. I mean, I have always been more of a proponent of practical effects, as a lot of you might know on here. Though I do like CGI when it's done well, and I will admit that Avatar did have some really, really good CGI and the 3D imagery. It is among one of the best visual experiences I've had in the theater. I don't know if it's the best, but it's definitely in the top, like, I don't know, three or so. It's really, really good. But as far as my feelings on the movie, like a lot of things, I try to kind of be balanced in my perspective. So I didn't really love it. I appreciated the visuals a lot. I enjoyed some things about it, but I did not hate it. I actually was always kind of okay with Avatar. Like, I genuinely enjoyed the movie. I think it is a good movie, even though it does some things that are very basic, and there are some moments that are honestly dumb. It also has some really cool concepts and ideas too, and does actually manage to transport you to another world, which I think is one of the big goals of film, of storytelling, especially speculative sci-fi stuff like this. So, if you're borrowing from Fern Gully, Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas, well, those are all good stories. So as long as you're hitting all the beats right, which is kind of what James Cameron does, you're doing fine. So I was okay with Avatar, but I feel like a lot of people suspecting this one, it's been so much time since the last movie, like I generating hype for it. I was actually surprised. Apparently, there are a lot of people that like Avatar enough to do that, but nobody that I really knew. It's just one of those things we occasionally talk about how it was great, and we joke about how there's like four sequels that have taken a long time to be made, which have finally one has come out. So basically, long story short, is that the hype? But yeah, this was supposed to be the summary, but that's the backstory. I'll try to do timestamps if I'm feeling like it. Yes, it's been a while since I've been on camera, so forgive me if I'm rusty, but I'll try to. Okay, I'm not going to keep it brief. Let's be honest. I'm not known for that. So if you really want to know my thoughts, if you've got the time, please listen. So the plot, basically, like I said, it looks pretty much similar to the first movie. Humans are coming back, but basically Jake Sully has adapted to being with the Na'vi. He's still the leader of the village with the Nateri there, uh, and he has children now. So the film is kind of also about their family dynamic and their responsibilities. Also, Sigourney Weaver's Avatar had a child, sort of a virgin birth thing, which isn't really explained at all. It's just, I guess, it turns out she's kind of like this chosen, almost Masonic figure because that daughter apparently can directly connect with a lot of the creatures and life on Pandora, like to speak directly to like the core consciousness of the planet. So you get a lot of that nature and spiritualism that James Cameron was talking a lot in the first movie, because literally the ecosystem is can bond, and he pushes that further, and it's a very literal thing. And with her, she can go even beyond what a lot of the other Navi can do. They connect their head, their hair to the tendrils of all the animals. Everything's compatible to work together in kind of like this telepathic, empathic bonding thing that requires physical connection. Like I said, really interesting stuff that he doesn't go too deep into, but it's cool that it's there. So that's one thing that's going on. That's like a subplot of the movie that is more set up for something else and isn't really explored. Might be an ongoing theme here. Jake Sully's got two sons. One of them's kind of closer to his dad, trying to be this leader as well, a soldier. The other kid is younger, trying to get in more trouble, and the older brother is often having to cover for him. And Jake's often yelling at his younger son, to stop kind of getting the older brother, in trouble. There's also another little girl who doesn't really factor into it much at all. But yes, the most interesting thing right off the bat that was most infuriating and annoying, but also intriguing, is that within like the first 5-10 minutes, I was annoyed. For one thing, because all right, I'll come back to this, but the whole, I think one of the key phrases for this review is just unexplored ideas. Like, let's go further. Pick one or two and go further. But let's with sprinkle throughout, hit all the beats, the broad strokes. But he hits really well. But I like my science fiction to be cerebral, or at least let's push harder into that one big theme, explore it more. So there's that issue. But no, the other frustrating thing was, as a plot point, the villain from the first movie, the Colonel, comes back, and it turns out that he did get killed, but his consciousness as a backup was transferred into one of the avatars. So one of the human Navi mutants that they use to plant their consciousness in. Like, some of them are still hanging around. Apparently the Colonel, and I guess some other soldiers as well, this was their backup, which makes me think, if they have the advanced technology to do this, why don't they just give him the body so he's closer to that? But no, we're just going to put him into these bodies so they can just go in, and theoretically they'll have the strength and speed of the Na'vi, but also the ability to handle the technology and the weapons. And also, I guess, kind of be subtle, because they won't be obviously standing out with the ecosystem and can maybe blend in with the Na'vi, which they don't really do the stealth thing too much, really. I feel like that could have also been interesting. Another interesting potential angle that isn't really explored too much. But yeah, so he comes back. Interesting thing to note, though, he's not technically the same person. It's the consciousness, the memories of the Colonel, of pretty much everything up until his death. But he's not technically the same guy. But he does go along with the company, with the soldiers, to carry on their mission, really without question, because I guess that's all he has to go on of, is who he was essentially made from, as well as his desire to get revenge on Jake Sully for killing him, or the original person he was sort of cloned from. It's, like I said, an interesting concept, and they could play a lot with ideas about identity and loyalty, which they don't too much. They touch upon it, but not far enough. So really, the Colonel and his team are just trying to kind of pursue Jake and his family, and they know that they're on the way, so they have to literally flee across the ocean to go to the water tribes, hence Way of Water. So they have to blend in, learn a new way of life, and they learn more about really the ocean there, because of course James Cameron loves the ocean. So one of the big deals about this movie was, I guess, finding new ways to film that same quality of footage but underwater, which I'm guessing was an even bigger feat. And once again, looks gorgeous. So we get a lot of the sea imagery and the sea life imagery of this alien planet, which is essentially, of course, ours, but with alien tweaks. And it's about their struggles to fit in. Mostly the two sons, typically, really all his children. That middle part of the movie, it becomes more about them. Specifically, the younger son, he kind of tries to actually fit in, even though he's getting bullied and everybody's getting made fun of and not accepted by the water people. He gets lured in to go hunting and almost gets attacked, but then gets saved by essentially this whale, one of these Pandora whales, who become a big plot point. And these whales, much like actual whales, and maybe push further, are intelligent, and literally the Na'vi can communicate with them. And this whale was apparently outcasted, because we learn a little bit of lore. We expand a little bit on really the history of the Na'vi people that all people were connected, of course, and at some point, killing in general was just outlawed. Even though I do think they do go fishing, so I don't know if that quite counts. In fact, I know they go hunting at one part too. Like so, I wish they'd explore that. But basically, I guess if you're sentient, but then all the life on Navi is connected. See, there's a contradiction here. But anyway, basically, you can't kill anybody, and this whale essentially was believed to be this killer. He's the outcast, and so but he saves the younger son. So the younger son and the whale actually become friends, and they kind of bond over that. So really interesting idea. Honestly, probably the best, really the best consistent thing throughout the movie, plot wise, was that part. Once again, the movie's got about, a common issue with movies, I think, is and I guess I could probably suffer from this as well if I try to do something. I know it's something you got to be mindful of, but you want to tell so many stories. There's like three or four main plot points, something that could easily be explored as its own movie that none of it's fleshed out. And this seems to be the part that this Way of Water Sea part is where Cameron seems to be the most passionate, because this story and the connection between the creatures and the younger son and his tale of proving himself is, interestingly enough, the main focus and where a lot of the emotional core of the movie is. There also is the another thing that I thought was kind of interesting. There is the Jake's kind of place, but he's ironically enough kind of pushed back a little bit. I think less on the focus, and there's almost that dynamic of him and the Colonel getting a rematch and facing off, kind of closing up that storyline or building off of it. But which they do kind of build to that with the climax of the fight. But for me, it kind of didn't work quite as much because we didn't spend as much time really with Jake in the movie at all, because we were bouncing around with a couple other plot points. I also forgot another main reason. Oh, see what I mean? There's a lot going on. I'll give it that. There is a lot going on, but the thing is, there is this element too where apparently, and I think this was a retcon, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but they clearly didn't spend much time on it in the first movie. Apparently the Colonel had a son that I guess was with him the whole time he was on Pandora, like this 5-year-old kid, and apparently he was too young to get sent back in cryosleep, so he was just left there. And he was raised by the Na'vi, raised by Jake's family, and Neytiri basically doesn't like him because he's not accepted, even though he was the son of their enemy that they obviously hated. So I think they were actually pretty accepting considering. So once again, you'd think it'd be built up, but they don't really have much of a conversation. There's just that there's a lot of like clumsy exposition in the beginning of the movie, like she never really forgave him for what the father did, never fully accepted him, and that's like the only mention of that issue until like towards the end with the payoff. So this is what I mean when these big moments happen. It's like I feel like the actors are trying, the visuals, the people behind it, it's all working together. The music is appropriate, but there wasn't enough time focused on it to make the final conflicts pay off as much. Because yeah, his son was basically there, raised by Jake and his family, gone wild. And then when they reconnect, because he captures him, I was gonna say kidnaps, because he looks so much bigger. This is technically his kid, but I guess he kidnaps his kid, but he's like an adult. So at this point, but when the Colonel, when he reconnects with his son, that is for me like that is some of the most interesting stuff in the movie that I wish was one of the things that was delved into more. Like I said, so many interesting ideas, and he does delve into it a little bit, but you could kind of predict, like when that happened, when they introduced the son, I knew where the plot point was going to go. Like obviously they're going to reconnect, and there's going to be some, conflict about loyalty and whatnot. But no, the son never really wavers that much, and the Colonel doesn't really get swayed too much. I mean, there's a little bit of a change at the end, the kind of an acceptance where he does sort of accept his son, but he's like initially says, technically you're not my son, you and I have nothing to each other, but I know you in a way. I feel some attachment, so I'm willing to give you a chance. So I feel like that concept, that's just an interesting sci-fi or philosophical subject, I think, about consciousness and memory and how much of your identity is you, and how much of it, based on your experience versus your memory. Like, if all you have is the memories of someone else, are you essentially that person? Technically, no. But then, if you have nothing else to go on with your identity, to build from, that's why the Colonel, I think, just kind of goes along with everything. He doesn't question it because that's basically his entire thing. That's just been his entire motivation from the time he was born. Woke up, almost knocked over my mic there. See how excited I am. So I love a lot of these ideas, but I wish they would just delve deeper into them. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of going over the plot and some of my general feelings about that. Oh yeah, if I had to summarize the main takeaway from the movie, it's that whaling is bad, which I agree with. I mean, one of my favorite movies is Star Trek 4. You know, obviously the Voyage Home, which I think, you know, that movie was all about saving the whales and, you know, caring about nature and the environment. Also, some great whales. So I think it's funny. This movie is very much like whaling is bad, and so the focus this time, unobtainium, maybe one of the criticisms he took that he decided, you know, to deal with. Unobtainium is not mentioned at all. Nary a mention. Giovanni Ribisi has like a brief cameo, nothing. But the evil corporate human guys are still the same. They're not. I would say they might actually be even less dynamic than the first time. And admittedly, they're not really the main villains. The Colonel is a bit more dynamic, at least theoretically. But all the actual humans behind him, like Edie Falco and the poachers, like is like an Australian guy or something. Yeah, this time we're not just mining for resources, although wish they explored this too. Apparently, Earth, you know, has become obviously destroyed basically by environmental problems and pollution. So now we have no choice to come back to Pandora and I guess terraform it. Though they're really just burning the forest and they have to pacify the inhabitants. So, you know, obviously pretty classic sci-fi trope there. But you know, that's just one line. So that explains why the humans came back in such force. Which why wouldn't they anyway? I mean, they lost once, but yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so we replaced those villains with the same people essentially, but this time they're they're hunting the whales. They're poaching the whales, and even though unobtainium, as far as I know, is still there. Unobtainium. It's a serious movie. See, I appreciate the good puns and wordplay. It was so unobtainable that they just forgot about it. They just okay, okay. Oh, I may have to edit this. Um, no, no, yeah, but I mean, I don't understand. I guess they theoretically could still mine unobtained, but no, the oh man, oh man, get it together here. um, this time, this time, they're poaching the whales. The whales are the new thing that they're also maybe in addition to unobtainium they're going for because they're the whales. This is how much we have to hammer home that whales are important. And by the way, I like these ideas. I'm fine with it, James Cameron. And I will have to add something on addition. I'm a big fan of James Cameron. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. But with these movies, he's not subtle at all. He's passionate about these things, and I agree. I think I love whales, absolutely, um, but we have to hammer home how important they are because literally the whales, and it's said that they're probably more intelligent than humans. You know, which I mean, I think that even these alien whales, I think it's interesting in this aspect. He's going for okay, they're intelligent, but just because they're intelligent doesn't necessarily mean they need technology. Because if they have everything they need and they're at peace with nature and themselves, why? So there might be some interesting idea in there philosophically as well. I suppose we could be focusing on. So maybe that's what he's going for. But within the whales is literally like I think it's within their brain. There's this substance that it stops aging. Basically, it's immortality, right? So that's one reason they're hunting the whales is that like that's a commodity. It basically just heals you. Really cool idea, but that's pretty much it. That's all we get about it, and that's fine. But it's just like it's there and like okay, so that's the main thing we're going for now. What about unobtained? I guess unobt. I just think it's like okay, this is. I mean, I guess it could just be a subset. Like there's different different groups that are focusing on different things like deforestation or terraforming. Ula actually brought up the point when I was talking to her about this that but the humans can't even breathe the planet. Like I keep saying they're going to terraform the planet because in a lot of sci-fi stuff you're going to a new planet where you can't survive in the atmosphere. You're going to find some way to adjust it, right? Once again, Star Trek, the Genesis torpedo, used by Kirk. Okay. Just the terraforming, which once again doesn't have to be, really the main focus of the story. But yeah, I don't know if they destroy the forests and everything, it's got to help them. Like they still need the respirators to live there, so I feel like they gotta find a way around that. I mean, obviously, if these movies continue, I'm guessing they'll find a way to make peace, which would be great. Um, so yeah, there is some of that going on, but yeah, those poacher guys. Of course, there's like one scientist who's kind of good, even though he's still working for the bad people because I guess you need a paycheck. Yeah, but yeah, he was also comically bad, and it's just like so I mean, it's one of those things like you don't have to be subtle. It's just so one dimensional, and so many of these other characters are a bit. I mean, I don't want to say they're one dimensional, but they're not. They're just not very well explored. Like there's a bit of a like kind of a little bit of a romance developing, I guess, between the younger son and the chieftain of the water tribe's daughter. The chief water tribe chieftain's daughter, and apparently his wife, the queen of the water tribe people, was Kate Winslet, which it had to be told after. I was like, was it Kate Winslet was in this movie? And okay, it makes sense. Cameron, Titanic, he likes to bring his people back sometimes, sure. But Sigourney Weaver's Avatar, it was like you could, even when, which I thought was interesting, they cast her as her daughter, which I thought she played it pretty well considering she's supposed to be a much younger character. But even with that character, the way they do the mocap, I could still see the features of Sigourney Weaver because she's got such distinctive features. With Kate Winslet, it's like the way they designed the face, no idea, which maybe that was the point, but I was just like, even with her performance though, like I didn't recognize the voice, so maybe that was really good acting, or I don't know, not distinctive enough. Of course, I think it was mostly another language, and I don't know. Once again, she didn't have that many scenes. But all right, I pretty much I'm gonna try to rein this in a little bit here. I feel like that was basically all plot with a lot of commentary in between. So all right, I did break this down a little bit to be organized, theoretically organized. My pros. Can anybody guess what the pros are going to be to this? Visuals, of course. Like I feel like before the movie even came out, we all knew. Like visually, it's great, and it's something to consider because CGI has advanced a lot, really since Avatar, and maybe partially, certainly in part because of Avatar's influence. That I think that we, as movie-going audiences, absorbers of these things, we maybe we don't appreciate it as much. We become a little numb to it, perhaps, because like especially after all the Marvel movies, like they all had great set pieces, and I'm not saying that it was always the best, but like especially with all that Disney money and the big studios, we're used to big visual spectacles with a lot of CGI that looks good. Sometimes I think we get tired of it because there's so much of it and it's like too unrealistic. Bring back more practicals. I would love it if James Cameron like did a lower, more grounded, condensed version of something like Avatar on a smaller budget, but with or with heck the same budget, but with practical effects. Oh, that would be so awesome. That would be even better. I think that would be great. That would be so good. Though I will say, I feel like for now it feels like a lot of the CGI seems to have plateaued because looking at Avatar again and comparing it visually to the previous one, back in 2009, and admittedly I saw it in 3D, I feel like I do not think it. For the most part, I think it was about the same. The only areas I think that maybe where it surpassed things was there were some tiny details, like I feel like with the mechs, like the guys have their mech suits walking around, and the little details to the metal on the ships and all the little sea creatures, the sea life. There was a lot of different color, a lot of movement, fluidity of the fish and the plants, and really even the fight scene at the end where basically the ship is sinking and it's all underwater. Reminds me of like the Abyss or Titanic. A lot of the visual tropes, of course, come in. He's been making a lot, basically the same movie, uh, except a lot of his other ones I think were better. We'll get to it. Maybe you disagree. Let me know. But yeah, no. So that part I really liked, even though it was so dark, which I wasn't my. I didn't love that part. I could still tell that it was really really immaculate design, even within all the shadows. And it was this really intense fight scene. There was a lot of quickness and just a lot of speed and rapidity. But he doesn't linger on a lot of those shots as much, especially when it came to the action or it comes to all those little details. Like I love those big shots of the space station or just of like the soldiers walking around. But we don't really. He doesn't hold on them quite as long, except for a lot of the ocean stuff. I think the whales look pretty cool. They just basically were whales with four eyes. But he doesn't. He didn't hold on them. But I did notice there was a. I think there was more detail to the machinery, and he was playing more with different color schemes and movement. If I remember correctly, I think that the first movie in that forest it was beautiful, but it wasn't like the trees were constantly blowing in the wind. If I remember correctly, you had a lot of still moments to take in the beauty of like the glowing orbs and whatnot. There was more movement this time, so I think that might be one way he advanced it, but he didn't really hold on it long enough. So I kind of want to say I appreciate the visuals of the first movie more, but I do think there was some technical improvement in this one. I just don't think that it was utilized quite as well for you to really appreciate it. Maybe in IMAX it's different, but where I saw it was like some things I liked for the world building, but I don't think it was quite as well. Uh, Also, and I might stay a little while on this one. I'm going to hammer this home. There's some really cool ideas in this movie. Really, just with really kind of delving more into the idea that the whole ecosystem's really connected, and there's that consciousness, and his one daughter, apparently could be like this, the chosen one essentially, and has even more connection with Pandora, but not explored much. You've got the relationship really between the two brothers, which I think especially with the younger brother, I liked his story. I actually liked him as a character. He was probably the most fleshed out character in the movie, but I feel like it was like the movie was cut into three acts, and each act was kind of its own movie, and that one was the most cohesive for his growth as a character with the whale and everything, and trying to actually be out among the water tribe was probably the strongest point in the movie. Now that I'm thinking about it, definitely the most cohesive. But his relationship with his family, I feel like we couldn't delve into as much. And the older brother, who, this is the spoiler section now, officially spoilers, if I haven't spoiled enough already. Big spoiler: the oldest son dies, and this will, and I feel I'm going to come back to cons on this one, but I feel like the younger brother got more exploration than the first one, so we should have gone further into that. Okay, stick to pros. Stick to pros. The acting's pretty good, especially from the Colonel. I feel like that actor, I forget his name, the Don't Breathe guy, he's quite good. I think he still got that menace, and he seems like he stepped right back into the character. I don't know exactly when he recorded his lines, but he adds more menace, and there is a bit more nuance to it with the character. I liked that because I like a good villain, and I thought that he had such a strong presence in the first movie. I didn't care that he was one dimensional, but it kind of reminded me, if anybody ever seen Chappie, Hugh Jackman's villain in that movie, it's very close to that. Like, Hugh Jackman's a great actor, and I can feel the emotion. There is a reason why he hates these people the way he is, and he is the way he is, but we're completely just having to rely on the actor for that. Hugh Jackman just hated robots because he just didn't trust them because. And so, if anybody remembers Chappie, but that's kind of what the Colonel was like in the first movie, except I don't know. I think maybe not quite as comical. At least he was an even keeled personality. They play more. I wish they would play more with the idea of identity, like because he's in this Avatar Navi body that's partially human, and Jake Sully's kids, they're not completely accepted because they're partially human. So are they true Navi? And Jake, he was saying, like, even about how his wife hates humans and doesn't trust them. And this is the first 5 minutes of the movie. I'm like, you're human, like, or are you? And once again, him having to like be more torn between his loyalties. I think they could have explored that, and that, and then once again the really the clash between him and the Colonel, and the Colonel's son and their dynamic. But the Colonel's son, there was a lot of stuff they suggested, but he wasn't really tested. too much. I mean, he kind of goes along with things, and then but he doesn't really betray them, and actually kind of avoiding this trope. Neytiri and really the other brothers still care about him and don't get angry that he was like on the other people's side, which would have created more interesting conflict. You know, like just about loyalty and identity and like it's just this is still the pros. There are some strong emotional moments, and like I said, I think that the main ideas and especially the middle portion of the movie and a lot of the acting, I think is pretty acceptable for that. I think there is definitely a lot of good music and of course great visuals that for the most part work really well together, and there is some real heart in the movie. That's my biggest positive is that I do feel the heart in some of those scenes with some of the writing, some of the more intimate scenes. A lot of them are kind of cliche, but most of them do come off being kind of genuine. When it's not brushing things aside as like be good to the environment and these one-dimensional villains are evil because they want money. When they actually focus more on the intimate moments between characters, like there's a moment when Jake really is looking at his son who's died, and you're kind of reconnecting with them, and there's sort of like this ceremony going on, kind of a funeral. It's this beautiful moment of connection. Just like I'll admit that touched me. That did touch me a little bit. I think it would have worked more if we knew the older son better and we didn't focus on the other one. But I did feel the heart in that moment. That's pretty much where the pros are. The cons is pretty much what I was just trying hard to resist complaining about. A lot of underdeveloped ideas, a lot of plot points that just aren't given a lot of time. They fall short because I guess they're more sequel bait, building, planting seeds, but it didn't feel that natural to me. I just got frustrated because like we'll briefly mention this thing and then not follow up on it really up until the whole movie is almost over, or if we follow up on it at all. Um, and because we do hold on some of those shots, like when they're under the ocean, and I do think it's beautiful imagery, I do. But when a lot of the plot is kind of thin and one dimensional, I felt the length a bit. I really, and I think, well, yeah, if you're not going to flesh out your story, because I would argue you don't necessarily have to, because I think Avatar hit the broad strokes and check boxes and hit them hard enough and genuinely enough that as cheesy as it was, it functioned as a story, right? That's why Avatar it was successful. That's what James Cameron's good at. Taking those universal stories that people just really can get behind and just fleshing out the world, fleshing out the characters, making it bigger, making it exciting, but keeping it simple and digestible so people can like it. And it's got a universal appeal even though it's can be fantastical, right? Because he keeps the story simple. He keeps the characters simple. Even though there might be an interesting idea behind it or some interesting themes behind it to think about, story, it's simple enough, characters we like, but we flesh those ideas out a little. We flesh the characters and the world out a little bit. And he doesn't really do that enough in this movie. There are points where he does. Like I think with the younger son, certainly, and the whole thing with the whale and their bond and him trying to kind of grow. I thought that was. I didn't really think it was the most interesting part of the movie. For me personally, I like the stuff with the Colonel and theoretically Jake's being torn between loyalties and his identity, which really isn't explored at all. I would have loved that, but those ideas, or even some of the really exploring some of the ecosystem and the lore. I enjoyed the world building and the history of the world, but yeah, the middle portion of that was probably the best part, story wise and character wise. That actually was really good. I really enjoyed that stuff, and I really think that a lot of the visuals were there. But I think you got to cut down on them because if the story isn't quite there or it's not, we're not exploring the big stuff, which I really think that they want to hammer home the whole idea of children and generations and vengeance, but we don't really spend enough time with Jake or the Colonel, I feel like, in this movie to really have it hammered home successfully. So, yeah, that climax didn't work quite as well for me. And the beginning was kind of a lot of exposition dumping. And I admit, it's been years since I've seen the movie, so I didn't remember some of these like side characters, like the scientists. I didn't remember they were. I forgot some characters' names. So holds on a bit too long for some of those shots. I think that you probably could have shaved a half an hour off of it easy, personally. or cut out a plot point or two and just save it for the sequel, you know. So I really wanted to give this one a positive grade, and I, I kind of still liked. I liked a lot of things about the movie, and I liked the concepts, and I think the visuals are still great, and I think there is some originality in the presentation of the world, even though the main ideas might be pretty standard. I think there's some genuine heart. There are some good emotional moments through some of the writing, some of the scenes, some of the characters. I liked a bit of it. I just wish we went further. We picked like fewer of them and held on it. You know, we could work on other movies for other things. But I do feel the heart in Avatar, and it kept me invested most of the time, which for 3 hours is pretty good. Definitely can tell there was a lot of hard work in this one, for sure. Uh, you could say they tried. Uh, but yeah, too many underdeveloped ideas, a bit too long. Um, yeah, I think I liked the first one better because it was simpler, but you know it still worked pretty well, and it was still visually stunning. I enjoyed the first movie. I think I gave it probably like a B or maybe a B plus. I didn't really grade things like that, but it still probably sits around there for me. This one's probably like a C plus. I originally gave it like a B minus because I like to be nice, but I talked to Ula and she's like, it sounds like you really didn't like a lot of things about the movie. So yes, I'm giving The Way of Water a C plus, um, and that's pretty much my review for the movie. So if you feel that way about Avatar, you think that I have some points that make sense, or maybe you disagree with some things, or maybe I missed something, or I'm not looking at it a certain way, please let me know. Because I know there's Avatar fans out there, and yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. So I'm going to say, please, if you like these videos and want to see more, certainly subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can follow me. Really, I post things in the community here on YouTube, but also on my Facebook group and Twitter from time to time, usually doing podcasts. And there'll hopefully be more videos coming out about movies, you know, a lot of sci-fi stuff, comics, anime, all the geeky things here. But I take requests too. Recently did a, drink review. So that's where I'm going to officially end the video. Though for people that still want to hang out, if you're still watching or listening at this point, I want to say uh, that I'm curious about something, and maybe you can all let me know. I have a question for you all in regard to Avatar, because the thing about James Cameron, which I really like, is I'm a big James Cameron fan. Like I would say most of his movies are excellent. I mean, almost every movie he's made, I would say, is a masterpiece. Like, really, if we're talking about my favorite movies, he's probably got quite a few of them in there. I mean, the Terminator films. I mean, I prefer the first Alien more. I like the atmospheric, slow burn of the, basically the slasher in space. I think the first movie's scary, but Aliens is equally as good. I think The Abyss is a really good movie, underrated. True Lies is one of my favorite. It's easily one of Arnold's best movies. Titanic is a classic. I mean, heck, even Piranha Two is kind of a fun in a a B movie way. But hey, that's another reason I really respect James Cameron is because I can tell that he basically is still working with the same philosophy that he started out with, right? Like he's making these big sci-fi movies. There's elements of monster movies and horror, these big epics, but a lot of the movies really that just seem like really big budget, polished Hollywood endeavors into what could easily be classic B movies because he got his start working in special effects for B sci-fi and horror movies, and I can feel that. I love that. I feel like underneath in our interviews I've seen, he seems like somebody who really understands kind of working from that and really appreciates filmmaking at all levels. And I think that's still there, and he's still innovating and really using technology. I wish he still used practical effects, and I feel like he. My question to you all, basically, I come to it is, why? What is missing from Avatar? Because like I feel like his formula is still basically the same, like I mentioned. I mean, is it the characters? Because it just those like Aliens, the Terminator movies, they're just so much. I really feel like they're just so much better. They're so much more dynamic, and there's also more of an edge to them. Avatar just like I mean, I feel like There's simplicity, but they also are cerebral and they get you thinking. And I wonder, is there something specifically about how James Cameron did those older films in his filmography versus Avatar that really causes a big difference? Because I think I know generally what it is, but I feel like the guy hasn't forgotten how to make a movie. He's still kind of doing the same thing that he did. Like in a lot of ways, Titanic has a lot of similarities to Avatar. Like I said, does Titanic really have the most intricate plot? Is it the most cerebral movie ever? No. It's also about spectacle. And it's also got a fairly simple story that's pretty timeless, right? But, Titanic did have really pushing into the characters and really had a lot of great chemistry with the actors, and the effects were really good and they took your time with it, and there's so much great emotional moments. You could say a lot of those things about Avatar. um, I think, all right, I want to know what you all think. I'm going to end this thing, but I almost forgot to mention, I think one of the things that separates Avatar from all the other James Cameron movies and why it doesn't work as well for me and I think a lot of other people is the main character. Because we didn't even focus that much on him in this one. But in the first movie, I know he's a fairly simple character, but he's all in a lot of ways he's almost a non-character, especially in this movie. Like, I think that I mean, I always liked the once again the concept of him in the first movie, like those opening scenes where this is his only means to be able to walk again. So maybe he doesn't feel like he really is human. So there's an interesting idea there that he can't explore his life fully until he does join with the Navi. But there's not as much dynamic there. Like compare him to just Ripley. Compare him to Sarah Connor. Compare him to pretty much any of the other characters in this movie. It's just like I don't know. Maybe he's just not the most interesting. I don't know. Maybe it's an acting thing too. I'm not sure if is it Sam Worthington if he's up to the same chops, but I think that might have something to do with it. I think it's fine, but I don't know. Maybe you need more actors to kind of balance them out. Maybe it should be more of an ensemble. I don't know. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Avatar: The Way of Water. Thank you all for watching and listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. As I record this, holidays are coming up, so Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I might try to get some more videos up between now and then, and I will hopefully be posting something within the next couple weeks about my plans for next year, January. I'm going to try to do more video uploads like this and others because I feel like it's been a while. So, yes, any requests you have for other videos, let me know. All right, everybody, stay magical.